Oh gosh, how is it different?
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, I think it's a lot the same, right? Because we're still attempting to prop up these systems
Hmm.
because we're still clinging to them
Yep.
because the devil we know is always feels safer than the devil that we don't know. And but I feel like more and more people are becoming aware of the fact that it needs to be different. And sneaking up on the idea, I often say, I feel like we're in the zombie apocalypse, but we're all still going to work. Like,
Right. Right. It's a good analogy.
yeah, it's just really weird. And I feel like we're getting closer to the tipping point of people like, wait a minute, we can't just keep doing this. This is not working. Whether it's going to be the influence of AI and all of that shifting the economy so much that there's no other way but to acknowledge that things are changing and we need to all change. I don't know exactly what it's going to be, but I think you hear more and more, especially on the spiritual plane, of a shift happening
Yeah.
and what that means and tuning into the energetics of that, even if you're not exactly sure what the where the path is leading or even all the steps of the path, you can see the next step. So like get to that next step, feel into it. And I feel like there are more people having those conversations and not in a like, oh my gosh, can you believe she's saying that? She's nuts. It's more like, oh, that kind of makes a little
Back
sense.
to the Passionate Pioneer podcast, series three. You know me, I'm Beth Taylor. I am the Passionate Pioneer, and this podcast is your connection into spiritual awakening experiences and, of course, the path to joyful living. And today I'm joined by Debbie Harrell. If I can get my words out, Debbie. Hi, Debbie.
I'm glad you did that because I'm known to stumble over my words pretty regularly. And as we've just discussed, it's earlier here for me, and I'm just starting to my coffee. So good chances of word stumbling.
Well, for people that don't know you, would you mind stumbling through a quick introduction before we dive into the story?
With that disclaimer, yes, I can stumble through it. Um, Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to finally have this conversation. We've had to reschedule a few times because, life is always lifing.
Life is lifing, right?
Yeah. I am Debbie Harrell, and I call myself a rebel life coach, a questioner of all things normal, because what the heck is normal anyway? I started first questioning big norms like systemic and issues we were having. And then I realized we all as individuals intersect with those big norms on a daily basis. And what are those norms we have in our lives? And how are those affecting the world around us? And I just got really fascinated and nerded out about it and decided to make a living at it.
Yeah, very good. And if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, I think this started as most of us had that big awakening in 2020 in the pandemic, yes?
That was the big aha moment for me. It was just such a weird thing, right? We were all experiencing it around the globe. When has anything like that really happened? And everyone was freaking out about the old normal or the new normal and how terrible it was. And can't we just go back to the old normal? And I was like, really, was the old normal any is that much better? Like, I don't know. It was still problematic and um yeah, my but I was lucky in the fact that prior to 2020, I had some stuff that kind of started pointing me in that direction. So I had a little bit of a head start of everybody in 2020 because you remember when it first happened, everyone was freaking out. Like, what are we supposed to do? We're stuck at home. Like, and then everyone kind of got into the groove and found their little hobbies and their TikToks and their communities online. But prior to that, there was a little tumultuous, and I had that tumultuous period for myself in 2019, at the end of 2019. So I like to
Yes.
say I was slightly ahead of the freak out curve.
Right. So I had very similar, Debbie. That's interesting because I started doing some things online, and start kind of the foundations of my business, which later became my business. And that was in 2019, and I knew I needed to make some space to do this. And
Mhm.
then the space came, right?
You're slightly ahead of me. I wish I would have been that step because, yeah, anyhow.
In fact, for everybody, it was like you said, it was a wake up call. I think a spiritual awakening for the whole planet.
Hmm.
And I think that's really, in my experience, Debbie, tell me what you think. Is that, we needed that shake up. We needed that shake up because we were just, in sleep pattern, really asleep, going to work, waking up, going to work, coming home, waking up, going to work, coming home,
Hmm.
and everything else. We were really not consciously aware of what we were doing every day.
No,
What's
we
your
were,
take?
no, 100%. And that's a lot of what I talk about in my work. We are on autopilot a lot of the times, just checking the boxes, doing all the things we're supposed to be doing, or they say we should be doing to make ourselves happy and successful. Um, and yeah, we're not really present or aware of what we're doing or the impact that we're having by these choices we're making on autopilot.
Yeah. So, one of my first questions was, can you describe a moment when you first realized that your life looked good on the outside, but something was really missing? Now, was that the big moment in 2020? Was that the pandemic, or did it happen before?
It happened before. I had a one of those years, I say the universe grabbed me by the shoulder and gave me a good shake, like, okay, wake up, pay attention to what's going on around you. I lost a couple very close family members. I had some very serious medical issues of my own, which saw me having several surgeries over just a short period of time. And then while I was recovering from some of that, I decided with some friends to go to Las Vegas to go to a music festival, have some fun, try and pull myself out of the funk I was slipping into. Um, Unfortunately, that music festival was what turned out to be the country's largest mass shooting event. So I don't know if you're familiar with Route 91, the Las Vegas shooting in 2017, where 58 people were killed, but I was there.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that year was a bit of a catalyst for my therapeutic journey or exploring the idea of PTSD and what I later learned was actually CPTSD. And so I had started to do some work. But even then, even when I knew I had this traumatic experience layered in with several other experiences that needed to be dealt with on an emotional, mental level, I was still on autopilot. I was still going through the motions, checking the boxes, being the good little capitalist. I need to go to work. I need to put food on the table. I need to um, doing all those things. And I was getting rewarded for it. People were like, "Oh, Debbie, you're so strong. Like this is amazing. You've been through so much, and look at you." And the point, the moment when I realized this isn't the way it's supposed to be was I said to a friend, if one more person tells me how strong I am, I'm going to punch them because I'm done. I can't.
It's all falling apart inside. You have no idea.
Yeah. And I felt like it. I felt like I describe it as I was in a slow stumble. I was still upright and moving forward, but I was so close to doing a face plant. And so that moment was, yeah, something's different's got to happen. And I was on a walk with a friend, as I said, and she looked at me, she's like, Debbie, I've taken time off work for far less than what you've got going on. What? What is this you speak of? Take time off? What?
What's that?
And that was in 2019 that I was having that conversation. So, right, like almost 2 years after the shooting, I was still, you know, on my autopilot treadmill, just doing all the things I thought I should be doing. Um, and then yeah, that friend gave me the permission I really needed to hear. Um, and then I took some time off and then had my own freak out. Like, what does this mean to take? I went about it in a kept a lot of those patterns in my healing journey too. I'm like, okay, I've got time off. I got to figure this out. I've only got a certain period of time. So I treated it like a to-do list. And um, so I've always said I was thankful that the pandemic rolled around because once the pandemic happened, I was like, oh, okay, well, I have more time now. Like I can just relax a little bit. Like everybody's taking time off. We're going to figure this out.
Yeah,
But
because when you take that little just that little bit of time, you do you're still on that autopilot checklist.
mhm.
But I do like that word you used, permission. So once you gave yourself, or your friend had to give you the permission, and then you gave yourself the permission to slow down, take the time off. And but it does take time to recalibrate and
Mhm.
really, step away from that work environment because you're still on that do. Because we are very much, or we were, the old world, the old normal, human doings
Yep. I
and not
say that all
human
the time.
beings, right?
We're supposed to be human beings. We don't need to do to be of value or worthy. We just need
Right.
to be.
Yeah. But you see a lot of people, well, most people don't understand that. What do you mean I don't have to do anything? Well, you do have to do some things. You do have to take action, but it's the right action for you. It's not what everybody else, take away everybody else's expectations. You mentioned they.
I don't know who they are, but they're
I
really
don't know
annoying
who they are
sometimes.
either, but they're very loud, aren't they, in the in the grand scheme of things. So, okay, so then you did actually manage to take that a little bit of time in 2019 and then
Mhm.
a major amount of time in 2020.
Mhm.
So, what were the changes that happened for you in the pandemic? What was your experience?
Well, I started doing things a little differently, as everybody did, right? I started connecting with a lot of people online. So I live it rather rurally and a little isolated, a little literally on an island. So it gave me the opportunity to connect with lots of people. Not that I didn't ever travel. I mean, I did travel, but to connect with people on an ongoing basis from around the world, really. And hear other people's stories and become fascinated and curious about the weird experience we were all having. I had done plenty of therapy, right? Because I had a traumatic experience. So yes, I was in therapy. I started working with coaches. I started working with a coach because I had the idea like maybe I don't go back to this job that wasn't really fulfilling in any ways. And I realized later it was actually very toxic and probably doing a lot more harm than good. Wasn't there yet, but I was like, hey, let's explore. Maybe it could look different. Maybe I can do something different. And I was working with a coach and a cohort with a couple hundred other people, but still I wasn't sure because I feel like a lot of times we get stuck in that autopilot and so disconnected from that human being. Like I'm a firm believer this idea of purpose, everyone has it up on a pedestal. And I kind of feel like all of our purposes are the same. We're here to share love and to be of service in a unique way to us, like whatever calls to us. But that requires us knowing who we are. And when we spend so much time on the autopilot and the checking the boxes, we get completely disconnected from that person. And I know that was certainly the case for me because when I thought about like, well, what do I want? I had zero idea. So I started with, well, what do I not want? And I started removing things like, well, I know I don't want this and I know I don't want that. And then the path to what I did want became slightly clearer.
That's interesting. I believe I kind of did the same reckoning. What do I don't want, and then what I do want became clearer.
Hmm.
And I know if you know Abraham Hicks.
I'm
Um,
familiar, not I haven't
right.
done a
So
study
Esther
of it.
Hicks channels a group of beings called Abraham. She's been doing it since the 80s or 90s, I think. But they always talk about focus on what you want, take the focus off what you don't want.
Hmm.
But you've got to firstly understand what you don't want. And when you've been on autopilot, it's very difficult to, most people, when you say, what do you want? They might say more money, a car, bigger car. They don't really understand truly,
No, and
joy.
I feel like it's especially common for women,
Yeah.
um, because we are conditioned that we take care of everybody else, likely, most likely putting their needs before ours, focused on raising kids and taking care of everyone in the home and family and organizing all the things. So a lot of times we just lose sight of ourselves. And not saying whether that's a good or bad thing, but we get to a certain point in our life where it's like, oh, wait a minute, all these things are kind of fading away. Now, what do I do? Who I when I first became a coach and I was talking to a friend of mine, I wasn't coaching her, but she was in the middle of a divorce. And I was like, well, what do you want to do next? Like, what do you want? Her kids were also nearing empty nest years. And um, she's like, I have no idea. So I don't really think it's uncommon for women to get to a certain point and not really know what it is they want.
And I would say it happens as you get older, but I do also would say as a coach that I've experienced younger women these days. It's younger women that have got young
Hmm.
children that are also feeling completely lost. Like,
And I
who am
feel,
I?
and that's something that actually gives me hope, right? Because they're starting to have these conversations earlier, and we're talking about these things in different ways and recognizing the emotional toll of motherhood and raising children and the isolation if you're a stay-at-home mom and all this that could bring up. So I find the younger generation very hopeful. I feel like a lot of people my age kind of give them a hard time, but I'm like, no, look, they're having conversations about things we should have had conversations about years ago.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And the world that they're living in is completely different to the world we used to live in,
100%.
which is the old normal and the new world normal.
What is normal?
So exactly what is normal. So let's dive into that because I feel that it really is the whole podcast. Let's talk about that. Your new world normal and how you made that, um, uh, how you decided between the old normal, the new normal, and what is normal anyway. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I'm a fan of throwing the normal out the window and like not holding so tightly to these labels and categories that we have for each other, the ways that, the powers that be want to keep us divided, and recognize that we're just more alike than different. Um, Initially, when I had the idea for the podcast, it was, yeah, let's normalize the things that I'm talking we, the people, like the collective, um, want to be normal. And then I realized when you're normalizing something, you're making something else abnormal, right? So you have this normal thing that's probably seen as better, and then this other thing that's not normal seen as less than. And I didn't really like that either. Good example that I usually use is when you're thinking of neurotypical and neurodivergent, right? Neurotypical was always praised and saw as better than. Neurodivergent, ADHD, autism, always thought as less than. Well, it's not less than necessarily, it's just different. It's just the brain processing differently. And the reason we saw it as less than is because neurotypical fit into the systems that were created, right? The industrial complex, the going to school and sitting there for 6 hours a day. Like it worked for that brain type. It didn't work for the other brain type. So that was seen as the problematic one.
Yeah.
And and so, yeah, who's to say what's normal and not normal? And I was just watching a thing, this might be slightly off topic, but
Go
A
for it.
reel about a woman talking about the idea of homosexuality in the Bible didn't even happen until the 40s when someone had translated something differently. And how is that has ostracized an entire community of people based on that translation that that person actually admitted to in the 80s, but it was never retracted by the church and it's been so embraced. It's just those sorts of things, those labels.
Well, the whole
And
Bible is just a story, isn't it? It's just his
yeah, I mean,
history,
we don't need
his story. That's a whole other podcast right there, Debbie, because
exactly.
that's just
But it's
a mash of books and pages they decided to put together to manipulate and control the masses. At which
it's
point they probably needed to, because at that time we were in the medieval times, just not having a
well,
clue.
and that
We needed
and
some rules, but I think they went a little bit OTT, in my opinion. But anyway.
yeah, well, and like you said, okay, back then it might have been slightly more important for us to be aware of others because others
Right.
could be dangerous, right? Others outside of our tribe or our village might cause us harm. We're not living in that world anymore. Like we could
Exactly.
walk down that street and we don't have to be on guard, like people aren't going to attack us from the bushes. I mean, it could happen. Like you need to be aware in certain areas, but for the most part, that's not the world we live in. And so instead of identifying all the ways that we're different or the things that can keep us divided, like whether it's you're from this country or state or city, or you like this football team, do football or football. You
Right.
know, all because those are ways keep us divided too,
Wow, so many things.
right? And like how angry can some people get over a football game?
And I also feel that these days there's no real middle ground. People have very strong opinions either way. We've got a world divided at the moment, really, haven't we?
Yeah, and if we stop holding on to those ideas of the way and we could work harder to just recognize one another's humanity, you know, because that's what it is. We're all humans, humans being,
Human,
we're
yeah.
just trying to be.
We're just
Uh,
trying to be. Leave me alone. I'm just trying to be over here, right?
yeah. And,
Back off.
acknowledge that and respect that and not somehow think that I'm better because I was born in a certain plot of land. Like, how weird is that?
It's just
It,
location, right?
Mhm.
Or, you talked about different sexualities, but we're also different color skin.
Mhm.
I mean, it's just ridiculous. I mean, who cares if you're blue, black, pink with pink spots? Just really, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and it's funny because, yes, of course, when I see someone of color, I recognize that in them, and I know that that has influenced their lived experience. And so that should be honored and acknowledged.
Right,
But
right.
does that mean I'm going to treat them differently than than I would anybody else I ran into on the street? Likely not. Um, yeah.
So what's the biggest difference for you then if you're looking at the new world normal and you said, well, the old one was probably worse. So and we've already discussed the normal. So what's the biggest differences that you see then from, let's just say, before COVID, before the pandemic, or after the pandemic? In quotes, before and after whatever happened, right?
Oh gosh, how is it different?
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, I think it's a lot the same, right? Because we're still attempting to prop up these systems
Hmm.
because we're still clinging to them
Yep.
because the devil we know is always feels safer than the devil that we don't know. And but I feel like more and more people are becoming aware of the fact that it needs to be different and sneaking up on the idea. I often say I feel like we're in the zombie apocalypse, but we're all still going to work. Like
Right. Right. It's a good analogy.
yeah, it's just really weird. And I feel like we're getting closer to the tipping point of people like, wait a minute, we can't just keep doing this. This is not working. Whether it's going to be the influence of AI and all of that shifting the economy so much that there's no other way but to acknowledge that things are changing and we need to all change. I don't know exactly what it's going to be, but I think you hear more and more, especially on the spiritual plane, of a shift happening
Yeah.
and what that means and tuning into the energetics of that, even if you're not exactly sure what the where the path is leading or even all the steps of the path, you can see the next step. So like get to that next step, feel into it. And I feel like there are more people having those conversations and not in a like, oh my gosh, can you believe she's saying that? She's nuts. It's more like, oh, that kind of makes a little sense.
It is becoming more mainstream, and I don't mean mainstream as in mainstream, but I mean we're more comfortable now talking about it. We're out of the spiritual closet, as it were,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And these conversations about energetics and energy transfers and toxic positivity, and all of the other things that it's not just all the woo, it's scientifically proven,
Exactly.
you
And that's
know.
where I kind of like to straddle that, the
Yeah.
science and the woo. I try and keep my language practical because I'd really love to get that group of people that is still searching but isn't really familiar with the woo and the energetics talk and might be kind of put off by it to like, no, it is a lot of, even I just recently did a workshop called Beyond Outrage, like the idea of, yes, we are all outraged. We are frustrated and spinning and in that cycle. How do we get ourselves out of that cycle and start thinking about what comes next? What is the world we actually want to live in? What do we want to build next? What are we willing to create? And so I did a little workshop about that and totally forgot where I was going with that line.
Okay, so you did. So we're all spinning. We're out of control. But I know
Yeah,
exactly
and
how that feels. And you did a little workshop
oh
to
yeah,
to
because
explain.
we need to start thinking about what comes next. We are and it's a little bit, I know where I was going with it. It's a little bit of the principles of manifestation, right? You need to visualize and focus on what it is you're trying to create or build or acquire or whatever it is when you're doing manifestation, right? That's more of a woo way of thinking it, where um, practically, what are the choices I'm making in my life? So, like, if I can sit and get really dreamy about a world that I would love to live in, and then I can look at it and look at what I'm doing right now and see, like, is there any path from here to there? And what are the choices I can start making right now in my daily life that might shift me just the tiniest bit towards that life that I'm dreaming of?
Towards that joy.
Yeah, yeah,
You
exactly.
see, so that's why I totally understand, because for me, I'm a logical person. I come from a logical background, and but I've also been talking to spirits for a long, long time. So also bring the woo, but I don't always bring the woo in with the client. It depends what they
Hmm.
want and where they're at. But it is about what next step can I take towards that joy.
Hmm.
And when you said and it is about coming back to you, what can I do to make this different? Well, it's up to you, and you just take the first next logical step, very small. You're not going to go, whoa, right to the end already. But that's the kind of world we live in, though, isn't it, Debbie? Where we've got no patience. Everything's on demand. If I want to watch a movie,
Uh-huh.
it's there. If I want a delivery, it's there. If I want food, it's there.
I
We
mean, a web page doesn't load fast enough and we're getting frustrated.
Right. So exactly, so that you can see the manifestation and the visualization. And people haven't got time to watch a 3-second video these days. I mean, we live in an on-demand society, don't we? It's
We
very,
do.
but it's about going back to basically the foundations and the basics. Who are you? And finding the time to find out who you are and what you want, right?
And that's part of the practice too, right? Because to reconnect to who I am, I'm going to need to slow down and be quiet and listen. Um, and that's hard in our daily lives when we have to go, go, go and do, rather than be who we were sent here to be.
So when you talk about this new world normal, then what is that for you, really?
That's a good question. What is the new world normal for me? It is the idea of not holding on to normal, not holding on to the labels and the categories, and questioning things more. Um, and leading, I don't know if I'm leading from curiosity, but I try to listen to understand. They're talking about, or we had just talked about how divided we all feel. But I feel like when we're taking the time to connect with who we are and what's most important to us, the vast majority of us are going to say the same thing, right? I want time with my family and loved ones. I care about their safety. I care about our health and that we have food to eat and shelter. Like all those things are, when you boil it down, is the things we all want. And if we could focus on that a little bit more instead of yelling at each other all the time. Online is where that happens in real and connecting in real life because you're
Yes.
certainly not going to talk to someone in real life the way, well, I don't know, I try to do the same on both planes, but the way people speak to one another in a comment on a Facebook post is completely different to the way they're going to interact with people in real life.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, I lived in a very small town. I actually had to get out of the local community discussion group because I'm like, I need to interact with these people on a regular basis. I don't want to see them speaking that way to one another. Like I want to be able to approach them with love and kindness because I feel like that's what we're meant to be doing with one another. But it got really hard when you saw how horrible they were talking to one another on social media. It's weird.
So let's talk about that then. Let's talk about toxic relationships then, Debbie, because that's
I've had a
because
few of
you
those.
obviously, you came from, a working world, a job that when you reflect back was quite toxic. And, as a life coach, when women, mostly women, are looking to make changes and deciding, not everybody decides to go and be an entrepreneur, be a coach or a mentor or a teacher or whatever. Most of them want that stability, but they don't want to stay where they are. What do in a toxic environment, what's your recommendations or what patterns do you see with women as a life coach?
Yeah, that's hard to say because everyone's situation is so different. And right now, we're in a precarious economic time. So it's hard to recommend someone leave a job where they've got a steady paycheck. And luckily, as a coach, I'm not supposed to be giving advice or recommendations, right? I'm guiding them to figure out what's best for them, right? Supporting them while they're getting quiet and reconnecting to who they are and getting curious and asking them the questions so they can figure out what path is right for them. But the reality is so many people try, when I talked back about the purpose, they put this idea of purpose a lot of times on what they're doing for a living, which isn't necessarily the case. I feel like it's very rare that a person will find their purpose and their passion in what they're doing for a living. So many times you can find that joy outside of it. Like as you're getting to know yourself and the things that bring you joy, do more of those things and see what happens there. Maybe it'll bring you enough joy that it'll offset like this and looking at your job as what it is. Like this is a means to an end. I live in a capitalist society currently. Maybe someday we'll design something better. But right now we live in capitalist society where we need to have money to pay for our shelter and our food. And so without that, you're going to be struggling. Or if you're in a position where it's affording you enough to where you can be contributing to the causes that are important to you and supporting people who might be designing these structures that we all hope will be better support us in the future if we can extrapolate ourselves from the capitalist machinery. Um, but yeah, it's hard, and thankfully I don't have to decide for anybody. I get to support them in in their decisions, and that's fun to watch people's lives unfold in different
Mhm.
ways.
Yeah. So what are the underlying patterns that you see with most women these days?
For my age, right? I'm Gen X. I'm
Me too.
midlife, as they say.
Yeah.
So I'm seeing mostly, and that's usually who I'm working with is midlife women. It's the traditional trap of people pleasing and uh, little codependency, right? Because I put everybody else's needs before mine, and now I've gotten to this point where I'm feeling lost because my kids are out of the house. Maybe when my kids left, I got rid of my husband too. Who knows? I don't know. That's a personal choice.
Right.
Um,
Hi, I just wanted to pop on here just to say thank you so much for being here, watching this video, and supporting my channel. It is my honor to bring you these stories from these incredible women who are passionate about their lives and have alchemized their spiritual awakening journeys from service to self to service to others. If you would like to be part of my Passionista community, just grab a free copy of my workbook, which you'll find a link below. It's called Your Passionista Journey Starts Here. And start making those small changes to your life that you need right now. Thank you again for being here. Love you to subscribe and hit the notification button so that you know when all the new weekly episodes are live. Thanks again, Passionista. Much love and joy. Now let's get back to the interview.
but there's really that searching of like, what am I going to do now? And I talk to women a lot about a book called The Upgrade about menopause and the menopause years, and really looking at it as a shift. I embrace the visual of the crone, right? We hold the wisdom, we can share, we can um, nurture the other women coming up, but they talk about it as um, why were we biologically living so much longer past our childbearing years? And they're coming to more and more the idea that the women were the leaders. And so I don't see that happening yet, but I see a lot more women talking about it. And I think that is the future. Like I feel like a matriarchal organization is much more logical. I've recently read a book, Who Cooked the Last Supper?
I've heard about that. Yes.
Yeah, but it talks about all the matriarchal
Yeah.
societies
Yeah.
throughout history. And it's like, heck yeah, that just makes so much more sense. Like
Yeah.
collaborative as opposed to, so competitive and sustainable as opposed to like we need to just keep getting bigger, bigger, bigger. Like that's not going to work. I don't feel that I actually answered your question, but I feel like I got on a decent soapbox there.
Well, no, that's very good. Yeah, because there are patterns, but it's true about the crone and the matriarchal system is that we are the glue. When men went to war, the
Hmm.
women were the ones that held the country together. That's just one example. Um, but we really are if you look back in history, you'll see that's that was our role
Yeah, we held the
before.
world or we held the
Who
country together and then
and
got shooed back into the kitchen as soon as the
who
boys came home.
who? Yeah, exactly. Who put us back in the box? Let me think. That was in the days of the what type of institute was that? Mentioning no names. When
Well,
we got killed and we were burnt at the stake or
oh
drowned.
yeah,
Right?
yeah. Well, and that's also, I was listening to someone talk recently about the idea of that's why so many women have a hard time with this idea of the spiritual, the energetics,
Yeah,
the because we all hold that witch wound, right?
yeah.
Because it,
We don't talk
generationally,
about it because otherwise somebody will kill us.
right? For
Yeah.
growing herbs in our garden and making tea.
So true. Right? I mean, it really was as simple as that, wasn't it? And
Mhm.
I think that, at some point there was just that that imbalance because at one point I think women were 51% of the society and men were 49%. That's exactly how it was, and now it's the opposite. They had to take control because they felt that we weren't,
Well,
you
and
know,
that's why you hear a little bit of like this is a bit of an extinction burst, right? They're just trying so hard to hold control
yeah,
because women are coming up, like more women are getting
yeah,
educated,
yeah,
more women are holding positions of authority and power, and they don't like that.
yeah.
But they can't just shoo us back into the kitchen anymore.
No.
At least not yet. I know that there's rumblings of them trying to do that here in the United States, which is
Okay.
terrifying, but
Okay, it's terrifying. I don't know anything. I don't know anything about that, but there are. I interviewed. I did one interview with a lady, and she worked for the UN, and she was talking about the same type of thing. When women come together at the table and they sit at the table together, negotiations can be made very easily.
Mhm.
Men cannot negotiate. They just need to win at all costs,
Exactly. And it doesn't even matter if they come up with a crappy deal as long as
right?
they've won or
Yeah,
they feel like they've won, which
yeah.
is ridiculous.
And I feel that obviously the same, we feel the same way that, women, we are, I think now we're coming more into our own. Whereas I give you another example, Debbie, years ago in the corporate world, if a woman rose in the corporate world, she would have a lot of masculine qualities. And I don't mean that in a she looked like a man. She didn't, it wasn't at all like that. But the masculine qualities she took on to get
Mhm.
into that role, she had to match the men. And I feel now it's a little different because now we're allowed to bring that feminine energy into these corporate roles, into these business industry leading roles.
I certainly hope that's the truth. Because I can remember my corporate days and they brought us in for this. I was in management in time, so they brought all the managers in to hear a speech that one of the board of directors had given at another organization that they worked at. Um, and everyone was like, "Oh my gosh, that was so profound and so," and I'm like, "What?" Like that was just common sense. Like, and that's when I had the realization that these MBAs, and they have been taught a different way to think.
Yeah.
And I actually had the thought the other day, I'm like, they should just do away with that degree altogether because I feel like it's doing more harm than good. Because the winning at all costs, that mentality is dooming us all.
So on a daily basis, what what tools do you use to to keep you strong or to put your to put you first?
I really love that we came to this right at this point because I feel like a lot of times people in the personal development, like, oh, you need to have that, you need to do this and then this and then this, like the checklist for your morning routine. It's very linear, it's very masculine, right? Rigid. This is the things you do, this is your routine. And what I've come to, which I feel is slightly more matriarchal or fluid, dynamic, is I do have a toolbox, like things I like to do. But it's not that I do them every day. I have the opportunity to check in with myself. Like I am fortunate that I do have time that I allot to myself in the morning to do what it is I want to do. Do I want to journal? Do I want to meditate? do I just need to sleep in a little longer because I'm tired? I also have autoimmune issues, so I really need to be cognizant of my energy levels. Um, do I want to get on my yoga mat and do some stretching? Do I want to go for a hike and like get my heart rate up and get really sweaty? Like I can do any of the things. I don't have to do all of the things. And I don't have to do them every day. I can do something as simple as, and I talk about all the time, I do the dance party in my kitchen, right?
Yeah.
I'm making my coffee. I'm turning on the podcast. So it's not even like a long playlist necessarily. The podcast music comes on and I'll start dancing. And luckily the podcast I listen to has um, musical breaks throughout it. So then I get to do a couple more little dance parties. But anything that's going to feel me connected to me, right? That human being and reminding myself that because let's be real, like the world we're living in is very anxiety producing. Like it's really easy to get stuck in the ruminations of what if and oh my gosh, and did you hear? Whereas I need to remind myself right here, right now, I'm safe and I can contribute in ways, remind myself to contribute in the ways that I can. And for me, in the political climate we're here in the United States, yes, it is sometimes calling my representatives, but also it's being connected enough to my values that I know I can make choices every day that support those values and hopefully don't prop up the powers that be that are making things more difficult for people in the world. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a great answer, actually, Debbie. And I really like that there's no rigid schedule because there's no way that you're gonna get me up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go for a morning jog or do something of I did that. I did that in my 30s. In fact, I did have a schedule at 5 a.m. Before I started work in my corporate job. So no, you won't get me up at 5 o'clock in the morning. But it is, I love the fact that you talked about just having just a number of things that you can use. Those little joy moments,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's standing in the shower for 5 minutes and singing, listening to a podcast when you're making your coffee. Sometimes you might go for a walk. Sometimes you might think, I just need to rest this morning. I just need to
Mm-hmm.
sleep a little longer.
Yeah.
The main thing I found, especially from making my own schedule, you probably have the same, Debbie, and you know, my schedule is mine. I'm not on anybody else's schedule. So I always take a few hours every morning before I do anything else for me, whatever I
Mm-hmm.
want to do. Sometimes that's nothing. Sometimes it's journaling. Sometimes it's listening to a podcast. Sometimes I go for a walk. And it
Yeah.
doesn't, and sometimes I just need to sleep a little bit more.
That's the most joyous thing about being an entrepreneur. Like,
Yeah,
oh,
it is.
I can make my own schedule.
Yeah, isn't it? It really is. But you know, if you have a schedule and you do work, so I'm talking to our audience now, you do work for a 9 to 5 job, it's really important to put some time on the schedule for you to find those little joy moments.
Right. And they can be micro. I talk about finding the micro moments to just be quiet and check in with yourself.
Hmm.
Um, One I do, and I find myself doing it a lot. Like did a book club meeting last night, and the topic got a little spicy, and I can do this under my desk. You can do this at a board meeting, right? It's a little bilateral stimulation, which is soothing, right? I'm moving my hands on my thighs. You can tap gently, something that's going to remind you, like, okay, I'm here in this moment. I'm good. What am I feeling? Um, but you can do that all throughout the day. When I first started doing it, and I heard about it, I read about it in the book. I think it was How to Do the Work. Dr. Nicole LePera, I think is her name. But she suggested setting alarms on your phone. So I set them throughout the day, and it was a little reminder like, oh, come back. My alarm would go off and it'd be like, oh, where was I? Oh, inevitably, I was ruminating on something that I have zero control over, right? Okay, let's come back. Let's come back to this moment. Here I am. I'm safe. I'm doing this. I'm focusing on what's in front of me, looking for that next step on the path, as opposed to worrying about the whole highway, that I don't have control over, bringing myself back to the moment.
And I think once you understand that, and once you've had these, because a spiritual awakening is not just one moment. Okay, the pandemic was a huge awakening for everybody, but there are moments in our life that we have these pivots, these spiritual turning points, which I call them, these big moments where we change or we. But the thing, once you understand and you're consciously aware of who you are and why you're here, that you're a human being, not a human doing, and you opt for, you know, the things that bring you joy. Things you can't put the bunny back in the box after that, can you? You know, it's
No,
not
you can't unsee the matrix. No, you
right.
can't.
You just can't, right? So once you find all of those, Debbie, how have your relationships and your daily life and your overall well-being changed?
Oh, that's a good question. I used to be a super indecisive person, like could not figure out X or Y, X or Y. Like it would take me forever to come to a conclusion. And once I became better acquainted with myself and what's important to me, when I'm faced with a decision, it's super easy now. Is this taking me towards that life I want to create, or is it taking me further away? It's a pretty easy decision then, like, no, I want to do the things that are supporting this life I'm trying to build. Um, so many people are, that's where when you're disconnected, you can't make that decision. Like if you're someone who feels like I want to live in a clean environment, environmentalism is very important to me, and yet you're going and getting the takeaway cup every day at the coffee shop, or buying the single-use plastic water bottles as opposed to just buying like that is a disconnect that's happening in your daily life, and it's going to impact how you feel about what you're doing. Not necessarily on a conscious level, right? But like, well, the environment's important to me, and I know I'm doing all these things that are, counter to that. And so for me, it's made it a lot easier. I'm not perfect, but a
We're,
lot easier to make those decisions.
that's a great example. And no, we're not perfect. We're not robots. Not even
No,
computers are perfect. I don't believe in practice makes perfect because we're not perfect. We're not meant to be perfect. We're perfectly imperfect,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
So okay, I'm going to finish up here in a minute, Debbie. But we touched on the fact that we, as human beings, not doings, and the service moving away from service to self to into service for others. So how do you find that is working in the collective consciousness, this bigger picture of people moving from service to self to service to others?
How do I see it working?
Yeah, how is it you what's your experience and what's your feeling? Are we getting better as a collective consciousness on living authentically and being of service for to others? Or is it's very slow, isn't it?
I think it's slow. I think it's when, like, right, we're not perfect, and I need to remind myself to look for the evidence that it is true, right? It's really easy. Our brain always wants to look for danger. Um, so to remind myself, like, no, look, that's a little moment of me practicing what I teach in my group programs and stuff. Like, this is the idea of the world you want to build, and you only have so much power in your day. But what happens when you look out into the bigger world and you see other people that are echoing those ideas or doing work? And that's part of what the podcast became for me, is when I started talking to people about their work and what they're doing out in the world, and I realized, oh my gosh, there is a lot of us trying to make big changes and seeing that the way that we are operating now isn't helpful to a lot of people. So it was cathartic and a little therapeutic, and made it easier to hold on to hope. All right, we talk a little bit about joy, but I feel like Hope is Joy's cousin. Like I think we
But
need
they're
we need more
together,
of
aren't
both
they?
of them.
Yeah, siblings, right? They're together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting because I do I have also witnessed the same thing. I think that, I thought there wasn't many, but I think there are many people that are trying to, especially women, and this podcast is for women. And every time I do a new series, it's fully booked immediately of women wanting to share their stories and to say, look, this is possible. If I can do it, you can do it. And
Mhm.
I think that's a wonderful to share journeys, because as humans we're all about stories.
Yeah, and we don't have to do it in big ways. You can do it, I mean, you don't have to start a podcast to share stories. You can schedule a coffee date with a friend. This kind of came out of that workshop I just did, but schedule a coffee date with a friend, and instead of talking about the news or local gossip, like intentionally talk about the world that you dream of. And sure, it might feel a little weird because it's not what you normally talk about when you get together with that girlfriend, but do it anyway. Um, have a dinner party, talk about the things that bring you joy as opposed to just sliding into gossip and news
And everybody
or
puts their
reality
phones in a
television.
basket somewhere else.
Yeah, something. Just shake it up. If we want different, we're going to need to do different, and we're going to need to be comfortable in being a little uncomfortable while we're trying to do it.
Well, this is the
Um,
chaos we're living in, isn't it, Debbie, at the moment,
mhm,
where we
mhm.
go through the shift. It's a little uncomfortable. People are feeling uncomfortable. What's happening? The old
And they're
world is.
trying hard. Yeah, they're trying hard to cling to what was, and it's like, what about if we just slightly orient ourselves to what's next and see how that might be different
Yeah,
but better, possibly, like we don't know, which it does make it a little scary, but it could also make it exciting, right?
I totally agree. So I'm going to finish this podcast with two
I can't
questions.
believe we've been talking this long. I swear I looked
I
at the clock.
know. It's amazing, right?
Yeah.
Time flies when you're having fun, right?
Apparently
Um,
I can be functioning this early in the morning.
you've
Not very
answered the
early.
questions very well. It's we've just gone through your story, haven't we? Very well
Yeah.
done. Well done for the coffee morning.
Thank you.
If you could go back in time, Debbie, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Oh, my younger self. I think I would just give her a big hug. It's gonna be okay. Like, just keep going.
And what?
It was a rough childhood, so she
Okay,
needed some encouragement. Yeah.
so she needs a hug.
Yeah.
Right, nice. And what do you hope your story
And
will?
I would probably tell her she just needs to be a human being. She doesn't have to do because she was very much got to be the good kid. It was a matter of safety and survival, but then that turned in got to be the good student, got to be the good employee, got to like keeping myself in those little boxes and doing. Yeah.
It's a Gen X flaw. So where we
Yeah.
were brought up, right? We were definitely put into a box. You couldn't be outside the box. You had to be in a box. Choose a box.
Right. We thought we were outside of the box, but it was we just chose a different box than somebody else.
Absolutely. And what do you hope your story will inspire in other women who are looking to live a more purposeful and joyful life?
I always hope the word permission, although I'm not really in love with that word permission anymore. I want it to be an invitation for them to consider doing things differently. It doesn't have to be a big major life overhaul or reboot by any means. You can find those micro moments to reconnect to yourself because you're worth it. And the world needs you.
Worth it. You're worth it. And the world needs you. Fantastic. And a great sentence to end this podcast. A million thanks to Debbie for joining me today, and thanks to our audience for hanging out with us. We hope you find it inspiring and empowering, and you'll find all you need to know about both of us in the show notes below. So until next time, this is the Passionate Pioneer and Debbie signing off.
Thank you so much.
Bye bye. Wow, another powerful Passionista conversation. I hope that this guest's journey, experience, and story has inspired something deep within you. Remember, it's about following the joy moments in your life. It's a beautiful dance with the universe. If you would like to dive deeper into your joy journey with me, you will find all the links below this video, including a link to a free workbook that will help you to start your joy journey. And until next time, Passionista, I'll say goodbye. Much love and joy.